Hi everybody, welcome to the Renaissance Woodworker. I'm your host, Shannon Rogers, and welcome into my shop. I've got kind of a special treat. I'm installing a new tool in the shop today, and it's a tool that I've been looking for going on 4 years. And it is one of these. This is called a post drill because, well, generally it mounts on the post. These are traditionally blacksmithing tools, and essentially it's a drill press. Now, they've been, I don't want to say adopted, but woodworkers have brought them into their own shops, and it was kind of the 19th century equivalent of the modern day drill press. I've used them at the Stepping Stone Museum before. They're a lot of fun, and I finally found one that was in decent shape. However, it is missing a flywheel. So any of you out there happen to know of a Champion blower and forge post drill and have a flywheel you're not using, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to keep scouring the yard sales and flea markets and eBay and hope to find one. The flywheel doesn't really, it still works. The flywheel obviously just keeps the rotation up with less effort. Now, post drills obviously, are installed on a post. You could certainly put it right against the wall, but the problem is as you turn the crank, if it's too close to the wall, you're probably going to graze your knuckles against the wall every time. A lot of times the post was right in the middle of the shop and with post and beam construction, and it gave you freedom of movement to move anything all the way around it. Obviously I don't have that luxury here, so I just grabbed a 4x4 piece of Douglas fir from the local home center and I installed it on my cinder block wall. Now I've got Tapcon concrete anchors for that, and I needed to drill a countersunk hole, and 1/8" countersunk hole to match my washer. The screws that I have aren't long enough to go all the way through this 4x4 and deep enough into the concrete. So I chucked up a 1" Jennings patterned bit in my brace and bit and drilled out the recess hole. Once I had that hole to the depth, it was about 2 inches deep, I followed it up with a 1/4" Jennings bit to drill all the way through. I wanted that hole to be as wide as the shank of the screw, so the screw will pass through the 4x4 without any resistance. From there, I wanted to install it on the wall. Now I can use construction adhesive to adhere it here. I'm going to be doing some construction work and adding in a faux wall, a wooden wall here shortly, sometime this spring. So I don't want to attach this just permanently yet. I might end up moving this later on. So I'm just going to screw it into the wall right now. So I've got, happen to have a hammer drill and a carbide tip bit. Line up the holes that I've got here, drill them on out. I'll use a level to make sure that we're plumb and drill the other hole down at the bottom. Then I can screw them in tight. And now I've got a post up against my cinder block wall. Now, mounting the post drill on here, you need to figure out where you want to put it. And I did a little bit of research, and the literature basically says you want to position the post drill so that the top of the crank is right about shoulder level. So I've made a mark right at shoulder level on my post. And before I actually attached this to the wall, I brought it over to the bench and I laid the post drill on top of it and did all that, so I wasn't muscling the thing in place. Once I had it positioned where I wanted it, I went ahead and pre-drilled holes through the wooden assembly to attach it. So now I'm ready to screw it down to the wall. This should be fun. Oh, sucker's heavy. And there we go. And you can see when the crank comes up, it's right at my shoulder height. So it looks probably a little bit low. If you've been to museums and such and you've seen this drill assembly, it looks way up high on the wall. In fact, at the Stepping Stone Museum, we've got it installed way up high. And in using it, I've gotten really tired because what happens is it's up here. So already your arm's extended, and as you crank, you're having to reach up each time. And it's not efficient, and it can be really exhausting. Here, I could stand here and I'm in a much more comfortable drilling height. I took a little square of plywood and just attached it to the plate. That way, if I'm drilling through, I'm not accidentally drilling into the metal and hurting my drill bits. It's pretty simple. Turn the crank and it drills. What's cool about these is there's this little pawl up top, and as you turn, the crank is attached to an elliptical circle, and as it comes up, it drives this arm up, and this advances this wheel up top here. And this wheel, as it goes around, you can see this is what advances the quill up and down. There's a little screw right here that determines how far up and down this will go. And you can actually fine-tune it so that right now I'm only advancing 1 notch here. And it's a very slow advance. And this would be if I were working on steel or something like that and need to go really, really slowly through it. If I pull this back, now it's advancing 4 notches, or 4 teeth on here. And it's advancing 4 times as fast for every turn. This is advancing 4 notches. The chuck is just a simple cylinder that can hold up to a 1/2 inch shank, and the shank is tightened in place with a little set screw, which is basically an Allen key on the side. So I've taken the Allen key and I've got a little rare earth magnet just attached to the frame here, and that key just sticks right to it. There's a little lever down on the back that loosens up, and you can raise and lower the table on this post in the back. So now I can drill whatever I need to do. So I thought I might make a little project. I want to make a center scribe, and it's just going to involve drilling a couple of precise holes. I have a piece of Peruvian walnut here that's 3 inches wide by 6 inches long. I've marked holes and used a scratch awl to mark them for the posts for 3/4 inch dowels that will serve as guide rails, if you will. Set my table height so I'm pretty close to this, and I'll advance the screw just manually up top until it drops down into the hole I left by the scratch awl. Now I just start drilling. When I'm done, I can wind it back up out of the hole, and I have a perfect 3/4 inch hole through the edge. I want to repeat it on the other end with the same 3/4 inch bit. So I'll advance the quill so that it drops down into that hole. Drop the pawl in place and start drilling again. Now I'm going to pull out this 3/4 inch spade bit, drop it on the floor so that I can sharpen it later. I'm going to chuck up a 19/64 brad point bit. I did a little bit of experimenting, and this is exactly the diameter of a typical number 2 pencil. Advance the quill, engage the pawl, and start drilling. If you look closely, you can see there's a little bit of eccentricity in the drill bit here. And something as weird is going on inside my chuck. Ultimately, it's not a huge deal as long as I don't secure the workpiece to the table. You might have noticed as I started here, you could see the workpiece moving around. I'm still getting a perfectly square and perfectly sized, or at least as I've intended, a perfectly sized hole. It would be nice, however, to get it running true, and I think there may be something a little bit off with this chuck. If you look at some of the old tool websites, one of the first things they recommend when you put one of these tools back into service is to replace it with a modern Jacobs chuck. So that'll probably be an aftermarket upgrade that I look at sometime in the future. Got just plain old ordinary 3/4 inch oak doweling picked up from the home center. I'm going to cut it off in 4-inch lengths. And while it's not necessary, I'm going to slightly taper the end like I've done here. That'll prevent any kind of chipping in use. And I'm just going to use a Veritas tenon rounder, I think is what they call these things, tenon cutters. This is a 5/8 inch model. Just ever so slightly chamfers off the end. And now it will fit into those 3/4 inch holes that I just drilled. And a pencil will fit into the center hole. But I want to ensure that I hold that tightly. So I've taken the center line and drawn it out across and down the end. And what I'm going to do is drill a hole to intersect that, and then I'll tap it for a 3/4 inch thumb screw like this. I could chuck this back up in the post drill, but I'm just going to use my egg beater here because it's a really small bit. This is 11/64 bit. And I'll take my 1/4 inch tap and thread that hole. It's always a good idea here to periodically advance it a turn just to make sure you're clearing the teeth. Or rather, back it out a turn, not advance it a turn. You can generally feel as it gets a little bit harder to turn, you've got to clear the chips a bit. Now this edge is tapped to receive this little thumb screw. Now what I want to do is shape this. This looks kind of crude. So I've just sketched out, I used a French curve, just kind of sketched out a rounded end and some cuts inward, because first of all I have to reduce the width so that the thumb screw can actually come in and hold the pencil. Right now with the thumb screw sunk, it's not intersecting with the hole. Now you could certainly get a larger thumb screw, but again, if we shape this, it's going to look even prettier. And I specifically lay this shape out so that when this flange here intersects this line, I'm intersecting the hole by probably 1/16 of an inch, and that will firmly hold the pencil. Or I can switch over to a white grease pencil. I like to use this on darker woods, and that's actually what I did to mark this out. So let me grab my fret saw and I'll saw out this shape. Glue's dry, I want to saw these flush. I'll leave them a little bit proud because I like that kind of tactile nature of having them stick up over the surface a little. So I'll just pare them down to a nice shiny end grain. You could certainly wedge these, but you know, this is not like this is a tool that's going to get significant, wear and tear on it. I somehow don't think that this glue joint bond will be broken just in laying out the center line on project parts. There, we get just kind of a nice pillowed effect on the top. And this is essentially done. It's ready for finish. So before we go ahead and put the finish on, I just want to demonstrate, in case anyone is not exactly sure what I've been making. Oh, I've got a little bit of a tear out there I'll need to clear up here in a second. This threads into place and cinches down to hold the pencil firmly. And if I had a piece of stock, just grab this hunk of 12/4 sapele here and say I wanted to resaw this. Drop this in place and you tweak it, and this will now mark the center line all the way down the board. You can turn it whatever direction you want. And it aligns the pencil right over the center. It's just a real simple and fast way to get the center of a board. Really useful if you're wanting to lay out like the center line for a mortise, or in this case maybe wanting to resaw this. So I added a coat of shellac. Once that was dried, I put the pencil back in, threaded in the thumb screw, and I have a very functional and attractive center finder. So I've taken my old Delta benchtop model and I've kind of stuck it in hibernation. I'm going to leave it in hibernation and work with this in my shop for, say, the next year or so. If after a year I've discovered that I haven't missed that drill press at all, it's probably going to go up for sale. Frankly, the only thing I've been using that Delta drill press for has been drilling out blanks for pin turning. And I've actually got an attachment that goes on my lathe now to allow me to drill out those pin blanks right there on the lathe. Maybe we'll take a look at that in a future episode. But for now, I've got the post drill installed, very happy with how it works, and I've taken one step closer to being completely powerless in my shop. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.